Since I am working from notes, some of this may seem a little bit circular, but I want to cover all of the material. It might seem to be um, lacking in the critique of an aporia, so to speak. If you don't know what that means, it just says that I haven't completely mastered the subject, but I'm satisfied from my notes that I have an accurate perception of the psychology at work in the era of 2020 going into 2021 and the change of political administrations in the United States during this tragic situation with COVID. So we can't escape that. We should evaluate it and understand it. What I see is an outgrowth of a tyranny that has existed in the left that my other videos show is probably the way that Trump worked with Andy Warhol through the drug and trafficking lobbies in places like Pittsburgh and Seattle. And of course, if you background check my circumstances, you see that justifications are coming from Warhol. So I'm angry for the victims of COVID because all of this Bohemian Grove stuff from Warhol set up what they must think of with their thinkers, their New York City with its foreign policy towards the rest of the United States, set up as a masterpiece for the usual good guys. And it seems to me that when the politics of our society are being besieged by those who are violent criminals, in circumstances where the world's troubles are pulled in as a justification for abridgment of our dignities, we are obligated to consider whether a foe is attending dressed as a double national. My mother considered John and Yoko to be one of the most romantic stories in history, but it has allowed itself to play out as a Reagan pretzel about Foucault's pendulum of daring do and distorted views, where their east-west circuit has been Sean Lennon's chicanery, Sean's chicanery about what he sees as a twisted mutual fish story, a frame-up for a frame-up that is allowed, and it's a terrible east-west paradigm, and yet it has worked so brilliantly. The first person ever to say to me, knowledge is power, was an acquaintance who I met at the governor's school. You see, when you run knowledge by a child doesn't grasp it. But then you can upload this idea that there's evidence of things unseen at work, and they can rubber stamp a seal of inarguability. The child lacked knowledge not because it was a child, but because it was stupid. So the inarguable reasoning then engages that you could have saved the spirit of the Axis in this case, the spirit, the friendly ghost in Argentina. You see, when JFK was killed, it was a form of abandonment in a way, because Hitler's forces, well, the Pentagon Papers never mentioned that the French in Indochina were Vichy allies of the Japanese. It was very sinister and serious what was happening. John Wayne opened the Green Berets with some Marines singing in German. It was very serious, much more serious than just America doing unbelievable and unspeakable things to Vietnam, but and faking the Tonkin Gulf incident and so on. It was an actual attempt that's largely in some ways succeeded of the Axis adopting the American youth, who once they were abandoned were easily exploited. And I've known some of these people. Mark Carl's brothers always talk about how he dived into the water to save somebody, and that's a mass concept for the Christian fundamentalists who said future generations will appreciate that Mark Carl's gizmo of a crank that you turned that gave you an electric shock if you were brave enough to crank it hard enough was the paradigm of the Neva Corporation, the Jack in the Box whirly gig of Neva pornography. They had the TV for the name of the girl behind the carrot tape, for the Playboy Oswald the Rocky Rabbit, the Playboy Rabbit, when they gunned down the Playboy of America for this, cruel to the mind thinking from the Outer Limits, where they took control of the TV set. And this was specifically, Cliff Robertson, who starred as JFK and went to the World Trade Center where Dye had targeted it on 911 and flew around above it. This is specific actors from the Outer Limits who took control of the TV set with the Warren Commission. And all of their arguments are the arguments of things unseen. They got collaboration from mental health support group, after Greg Carl used to talk about purposefully excluding. I was excluded, and once they had purposefully excluded me, they were free to misrepresent me. I was deaf. I couldn't hear what was going on. I was just a dummy they were dragging around. A dead body from the Kennedy, that the administration that they brought back to life with the crank of the Frankenstein machine. Karloff was living at the Dakota with Ono and the spirit dude, and you can see the direction of their thinking when you hear their intones, dude, their thinking is, the seal of the inarguable, and there's evidence of things unseen, spiritual welfare issues and so on. And they misrepresented me completely, of course. When Black Lives Matter becomes servants of this unseen creepiness and a blackout attending it, promoting New York City's foreign policy towards the rest of the United States, you wonder, where did the NAACP go? The United Negro College Fund, where did they go? People who believed that knowledge was power and that being included in the dreams of the United States was an important goal. When you talk about Bilderberg Group, Paul McCartney, you're talking about alien tycoons. They can manipulate symbols, make a movie, get people worked up. American tycoons need to step in and say, wait a minute, we're talking about the United States government here. You can't just say there's a family union because some creepy Axis girl uploaded herself into the rainbow of an Attila and started talking about future generations while hijacking and hotwiring the command panel of the high command to siphon the command triggers and then make a mockery of it, saying, oh, it's the spirit going off. The evidence is right here in my case book. The whole case is based on evidence of things unseen. The spirit is the pontiff of the celebrity superstate. And the person who claimed that celebrity, Trump, Reagan, Lenin were the victims, Fenton had a name, Fenton Bresler, indexed to the National Association for the Deaf, which is on Fenton Avenue. What's going on? The circumstances of the world are pulled in as a justification for abridgment of our authority over our own jurisdiction, our national state interpretation. They say evidence of things unseen have condemned, a child for whom had no knowledge and therefore no power. And the politics of our society are certainly being besieged by these violent criminals. So you have to look at me too, and what I really was. I was crying, give people flutes, crying for the ecology, like Greta was. And now I am John Galt speaking. It's like they put it off for 30 years until it was too late, and now they can justify their, you know, binge kill in the name of staving off overpopulation's demands on what? The fossil fuel industry? I mean, they cheated us of ecological understanding in our schools. We're supposed to weep for the great reconciliation with the Spirit who did all of these things. I went to Pitt and talked. My mother took me to meet somebody who was a faculty advisor of some sort. I told him I was aesthetically deprived, and he told me, "You're not aesthetically deprived." The hell I wasn't. I had a gummed up neuroplasm. I was deaf. And he said, "Well, there's a museum right across the street." And I mean, I took that into my head. Go out and look at things. Go out and try to think clearly. Try to shake. I didn't even remember what had happened. I had neurotrauma. But, he said I wasn't aesthetically deprived. What's the meaning of aesthetic deprivation? I was deaf. We're supposed to say that these people who have proven themselves emotionally complicit, bragging openly of coveting the master plot of these English hippies, supposed hippie cerebralists, are somehow doing their job when they can't even see that a deaf kid who's confused and battered is intellectually deprived. Obviously, I was intellectually deprived. McCartney has catch-alls, If you knew, you'd still agree to it all. What else is unseen? There was a kid who used to come around. He was real smug. He was happy and he was healthy. I used to call him Totality Joe because of his strange theater. There was so much strange theater going on in this family union enterprise of the city of Pittsburgh. Like Leslie Katz used to talk about having no basis of comparison. Well, they put me up as a basis of comparison. My tears of trauma meant nothing. Just get rid of it. They were just getting rid of me. My tears of trauma were, for the same reasons as Greta Thunberg, except I was battered and deaf. Now, if you look at the people who are the real bigwigs of this nastiness, Peter Sinfield of King Crimson, God, what a jackass. If you saw his name with names were more recognizable, like Metzger from the KKK, if you saw Metzger Sinfield, or if you saw David Duke Sinfield, you'd have a lot easier time grasping what's really going on when you see Ono Sinfield. Because this is an Attila Rainbow thing that they're pulling. And they're the ones who are emotionally complicit through this Reagan pretzel. I think we're obligated to ask ourselves whether or not we're really, not being consciously abused with all this so-called daring do about the COVID crisis. I mean, when I went to those people from King Crimson that Sinfield is in to begin with, it was to come on about ecology. And all they wanted to do was set me up as like a little lucky rabbit for the corals to sneer at.